Hello and welcome in. Today we're going over the pickems or player props for Baltimore, Kansas City, and Green Bay, Philadelphia Eagles. What I've done is anything that's highlighted in green on either one of these sheets is more of a smash play or something I'm higher on. Anything that's not highlighted doesn't mean I don't think it's a strong pick. It just basically means that I'm not as high on it. But we'll go through each of them. So the rushing line right now, as of Sunday night, is 67.5 for Derrick Henry, right? Over under. Average last year was 68.6, and and that's the average, no matter win or loss. And losses was roughly about 3.7 per carry or 54.6 per game, but in wins it was 94.3. So right now it's expected that the Ravens will lose by 3. Again, they give +3 to the home favorite, so it's kind of a wash. It's like a 50-50 right now. So it could go either way. So they could win, and obviously, last year he was behind the 32nd ranked offensive line, and he was crushing it on games that they won, and even in games that they lost. That's still pretty good average. So right now, last year he had 32nd. This year it is the 25th ranked offensive line. Offensive line for Baltimore isn't nearly as good as it was last year, but definitely it's an upgrade for Henry. The defense, they're 14th overall, so it's still gonna be tough running, tough sledding. But what I found out was I kind of went through Gus Edwards' number because I would like to say that Derrick Henry is much better than Gus Edwards, but he averaged 4.4, so he averaged less per carry with a better offensive line than Derrick Henry did on in wins than Derrick Henry did on the worst offensive line. So for me, looking at that data, it means that I think Derrick Henry is just going to like run all over this team. And even in the losses, Gus Edwards had zero point 0.2 yards per carry better than Derrick Henry did in his losses. So it's an overall upgrade for Derrick Henry for sure. And then in any game that he had 17 carries with a 4-point margin, basically he crushed it. Like he hit in any of those games. So I kind of did the math here. Basically, 3.9, which is what Gus Edwards did on 17 carries, is 66.3. So that's like Henry's floor in a loss, if that makes sense. So if the line is 68.6, I apologize. If it's 67.5, his floor is 66.3. I think it's close enough that, and it's a better offensive line, that even if they lose, I think Derrick Henry is going to hit that line no problem. I don't think it's an issue whatsoever. Isaiah Pacheco was a little bit too close to call for me. His average is higher. Out of the 9 games he played, he only hit that in 4 of 9. So it was less than 50% for me. So nothing crazy about it. Just there wasn't enough data to back up that it being worth a shot or something where I'm gonna like smash it, if that makes sense. Zay Flowers, I like that one a lot because the line right now is 50.5. Now I went through it; his average was 54.5. Now what I did is I went through and calculated his numbers based off the games where he was with Mark Andrews, because there was a big chunk that I think would actually weigh it in his favor to like, hey, he's an auto click on the over, right? Because Andrews was out, Beckham was out at a time. Bateman had injuries throughout the year. So I wanted to make it weighted accurately, and it still was a good thing. It was still good. So 50.5, his average for the year. Again, when I'm saying this is the average for the game, this is only the average for when he was with Andrews. So that was 54.5. So that's over that, right? So that looks good. In average losses, he had 64.6 with 6 receptions a game. In wins, he had 50.1. Again, close enough margin that even in wins or losses, which they're predicted to lose, it's basically a smash. The other thing that's great is Odell Beckham's not there, and he actually had a pretty good amount of catches and yards each game. And this is also year 2. A lot of times receivers have year 2 breakouts. So Zay Flower has less competition for the ball, even though Andrews is back. These are the numbers based on when Andrews was there. I think he has even more upside. And then also in the losses, he typically hits that 64.6 per game, which is clearly over 50.5. So, and this is projected a loss, if you want to call it that, or kind of like a wash. And then Yeah, and then 6 out of 10 games with Andrews, he hit, and 3 out of 5 without Andrews. So, with that being said, I think he's an absolute smash. I think he'll hit for sure. I don't think that's a problem. Mark Andrews is also 50.5 on his line. He averaged 52.1. I did the same average that I did with Flowers, make sure that there was equal competition there. Let's see here. He had 48 in games that they lost, and then he had 62.8 in games that they won, average. So doesn't quite go his way because they're looking to potentially lose. Again, Odell's not there, so more targets for him potentially. Unless you think we're Rashad Bateman, and we'll get into him here in a second because I have mixed feelings on that pick. Let's see here. Yep, and then 5 out of 10 hit. He's at 50%. So out of the 10 games, he hit half the time. So let's see here. Okay, Rashad Bateman. So his line is 30.5. If you look at the data from last year, it's horrendous. This was, I had as an under. I was like, it's got to be an under. This is absolute garbage. Last year, his average just in general was 20. 10 less than the line right now, which seems like screaming under. 1.3 receptions a game, 13 yards in a loss, and 27.6 in a win. So even the best case scenario, he's under. Now, he only hit 5 of 17 games with 30.5. The reason why it seems like a trap is because Odell was there. And Odell was soaking up so many more of the targets and so many more of the yards. Now that Odell's gone, it's literally Bateman or the rookie that's coming in or Nelson Aguilar. I don't think that's going to be the case. So this is why it's a very slippery slope. It's really easy for me to sit here and go, yeah, auto under, like no brainer. But something tells me it feels like a trap for that reason, that it could be easily over. But that's why I didn't hit it as under and highlight it, because I'm really on the fence on this one. Right now, I'm thinking it's more likely an over. Just don't know for sure. Lamar was another one where I just didn't feel as confident on. His passing line is 22.3.5. He averaged 229. In losses, it was only 220. Obviously, this is a loss. Again, you can call it a wash. And 232 for wins. So when I went through against the Chiefs now, he did get 272 in the AFC Championship game. So that gives me better feelings about it. But their offensive line is significantly worse than it was last year. It wasn't 4th to 25th now. So I don't know how I feel about him having the time to hold up the pass. He's probably going to scramble a lot more, rush a lot more. They're going to have to figure out, quick passes here and there, which it favors Andrews. But then again, it's just one of those where I'm kind of on the fence either way. Didn't feel as comfortable about it. Green Bay at Philly. Let's see here. I'll get more into the Jordan Love, the over on the pass attempts. So 34.5 pass attempts. So his average was 30.05, so slightly under that. Average loss, he had 35, so that's great. And then he had less, 33 in wins. Right now they're scheduled they're the underdog, if you want to call it that. Again, favorites to Philly, you get 3 points. So technically you could almost argue that they might actually win the game. So however you want to however you feel about that line. And that may change, from here till the time they play. Now, their offensive line got a little bit worse. They're 3rd overall. Philly is on the defensive line. So 5 of 8 hit in losses last year when he was doing 34.5 and 3 and 9 in wins. So if you believe the line and you think that they're going to lose, more than likely he's going to hit. Now, another thing too is keep in mind is Christian Watson wasn't there last year. Dobbs was dealing with it. There was a lot of injuries throughout everything. So it's definitely possible. And I feel like also throughout the year, Jordan Love in the first 8 games, he was not playing his best ball. And then towards the end of the year, they kind of caught fire. He started finding his rhythm. So if you look at the data from the first 8 games, he wasn't nearly as good as he was the last 8 games. And then now he has all his weapons. They're healthy. I think that the scheme will be better. Better running back, more passes to Josh Jacobs, which can rip off, more yards, more attempts, faster pace of play. So I definitely think he'll hit over that for sure, especially if they're going to lose. So with that being said, another one I'm really high on is the Jalen Hurts here, and this is his rush line. So 37.5 is the line right now. He averaged 37.5. In losses, it was 40.8, 36, and wins. It's still close enough that it's, they're set to win. Let's see here. Now 2-5 in losses, 2-11 in wins. Actually, 4-16. I think I said under, right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I apologize. Yeah, it's the under. So out of 16 games last year, this is kind of a trap for me as well. I apologize. I didn't say that clearly. So based on these numbers here, it looks like it's a smash spot to say over, right? Or it's close enough. But when you actually get into the matchups out of 16 games he played, I didn't count the last game because he got actually injured and he didn't play half the game, so I took that out, and that was a loss anyway. But out of the entire year, only 4 games did he hit this line, 37.5. So it seems like egregiously like he shouldn't hit this line. So for me, it's definitely an under. And then the reason why it's weighted like this is because he had like 4 games of like 90 rushing yards, somewhere around there. Like it just overweighted everything. So it made it seem like the average is much higher because of that. But a lot of the other games, if you look at it, that are not those highly weighted games, like the 80 to 90 yards games, he hit like 35, 37, 34, 36, 29. So he was just under this line every game last year. But the previous year, it's kind of interesting because on 2022, his average was 44 yards a game, but he threw way less. So last year, it was changed up to basically throw more, run less. So it depends on what Kellen Moore decides to do with Jalen Hurts this year. But if it continues to be similar to last year, then I definitely think this is an under for sure. Let's see here. Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs is up in the air, but we'll go through both. The reason why Saquon's over, and I kind of broke this out a little bit, the line is 69.5. But right now, you got last year with the Giants, and he had one of the worst offensive lines in the game right now, was 68.7. DeAndre Swift, for the games that he played, was 69.7 with the Eagles. So what I'm trying to say is I believe Saquon would be significantly better than DeAndre Swift. So, and the funny thing about this as well, by the way, the average in losses was 41, but in wins with this is DeAndre Swift's numbers last year. So it's 41 in losses, 84 in wins. They're right now predicted to win. So for me right there, that's an absolute smash. And there was a lot of games of like 100 plus. So last year, Saquon had 29th. So not the worst, but one of the worst. And right now, he's behind the second best offensive line. The cool thing about that is Saquon in his career, since he was drafted, has had via PFF, 21st, 17th, 31st, 30th, 18th, and 29th ranked offensive lines. He's never had a top 16 offensive line, much less a top 2 offensive line. So the fact that he's behind one of the best offensive lines in football, I think he's crushing this line. Like, I think this is probably the most guaranteed pick you could possibly find. And then last year, 6 of 10 hit for Swift. Let's see here, in the win. So out of the wins, 6 of 10, so 60%. And then 1 in 5 last year for losses. I think it's going to be a win. They're going to win the game, and I think it's much more than a 60% chance of winning that. Now, Josh Jacobs was very similar to Saquon, and the thing that this is the best offensive line he's ever had. But the hard thing to compare is what Aaron Jones did last year. Now, Josh Jacobs was running like 3.5 a clip for the Raiders last year. Again, not as good an offensive line. I think they ranked 19th or 24th, and now he has a better offensive line. But the line is 61.5. With the Raiders last year, he hit 61.9 with a worse offensive line. So it's similar to Saquon Barkley, basically hitting the line almost with a worse team, worse offensive line. Average and loss, 34. Average and win, 81. So it's like, it seems like the same. Like, okay, well, Saquon, you said yes. Jacobs, you aren't doing the same thing. And again, same thing, not quite as good as the second overall, but he went from a 19th to the 14th, better scheme fit, right, to create better running lanes. The defense is better, for matchup for Eagles are definitely better defense than what Packers are putting out there. The offensive line for Jacobs on the Raiders was 15th, 24th, 28th, 29th, and 19th. This is the best line he's ever had. Definitely better than last year's. Now, here's the problem. Aaron Jones had 11 games last year, and he of basically 4 games that he hit, he had 20 carries, 20 or more carries, and it was like over 100 yards each of those games. I think the lowest game he had was like 78. But every other game was less than 13 attempts, and it didn't even come close. So it's really hard for me to go, okay, well, I understand that Dylan's hurt. I understand that the rookie's hurt, and I know they have other running backs that they're going to have in. So it depends on how they let Jacobs have the ball. If they give him 20, he's hitting this line. It's no doubt. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy going to happen. But if they split the backfield, if they don't want to just tear him apart, and usually it's always in a split backfield. So that's why it's so shocking. At the end of the year, he was getting 20 carries. That's so out of the ordinary for the Packers. But that doesn't mean it can't change. So that's what kind of had me in a pickle on this one, to be like, hey, this is the same as Saquon. Let me just smash the over on this one. This one more than likely is going to be an over, but I wasn't as confident as the Saquon pick.